My name is Sazandra and I'm here to talk about my game proposal. I was initially given a task to write a report about the principle of game design and their impacts on games. Once the board of directors saw my report, they were impressed and gave me a new challenge, which was to create a proposal for a game design. This is the phase 2 for my work, which is a game development proposal and phase 2. And after phase 2 has been success, we will move on to phase 3, where we will create the entire game using the information we gathered from phase 2. Although the board of directors have given me the choice to design my own game, they did however ask me to add some small elements like that are required. They are player name input, score, and options. So the player name input would basically be that any player who plays the game is allowed to input their own name, and the score would be anything if the players gets a coin, increase the score. If the player completes the level quicker, increase the score, and that will be clearly displayed on the canvas. And the option would be such as changing the background color, maybe increasing the difficulty level from normal to hard, changing the text style, and other gameplay mechanics. So the content on this presentation today will be specification of the game design, storyboard, canvas, screen design, flowchart, objects and interaction, IPO, code structure, data dictionary, scalability, and class diagram. So let's start with specification of my game. The name of the game would be called Run. Now, this game is similar to Mario, or more specifically Super Mario, which is the classic Mario game, like a side scroller. The canvas will consist of name, which will be on the top left, which, like I said earlier, player name input. So whatever they inputted, they will be on the top left, and time, score, and stays. There will be two modes, two difficulty modes: normal mode and hard mode. The game will also consist of animation sprites. So when the character is running, instead of running a blocky character, he would actually look like he's running. And currently the game has been planned to have two stages, and it may be improved upon and upgraded to stage 3 and 4. So the storyboard, as you can see here, a storyboard is a representation of what the story of the game is about and how your game changes from one scene to the other. Right now I just have a small image here, but I do have a well labeled and described storyboard that has been given on the previous report that I gave forward. As you can see here, here's my report itself, and here's the picture in a bigger. Well, you can still go to all the storyboards through the link provided here, and you can also see my screen designs through this link. Anyway, let's get back to storyboard. So if we did not create a storyboard, there would be a problem and difficulties when creating the game later on, because we would not clearly know where the uh, scenes are going to transition from one to the other. For example, if you press play, and what would happen, would it load the game, or would it load the difficulty menu, would it load the control page? So these are some of the things that helps you identify how you can improve it up on future. For example, you could start play on click, and you'll go to the play menu, and after this what happens? So you may die, and you'll get a pop-up if you want to go back or continue, and if you win, you'll get a second pop-up saying if you want to go to the next stage or go back to the menu. So these are the small things that are required that will help improve the game in the future. So the next is canvas. Now, what the canvas is the information on the screen that the player would see no matter where he goes. For example, this Southern Rai is like my name, the player name input. So name input, time, score, and stays. They will be on the screen no matter where the player is, as long as he's on the stages. So if it's in stage 1, it will display stage 1. If it's in stage 2, it will display stage 2. The score changes depending on how much the player can score. The time keeps decreasing down a countdown, and when it hits 0, the game ends and he loses, and that's just the player name input. So this is the canvas that my game is gonna have. Now, screen design. So, screen design are the sketches and ideas that have been drawn to have a rough idea of understanding of where the game screen will look like in the future. Now, although we have a storyboard that tells us how the scene transits from one screen to the other, what we don't have is a full knowledge of what will contain within those screens. So, as you can see here, when you click play, you will go to the stage 1, but you do not know what is contained within the stage 1. So that's when screen design comes in. It will tell you this is an object, this is an object, this is a canvas, these are objects. So these are the detailed information that the screen design provides you with. You can go in a full depth. I have labeled every screen and like made a perfect design, but those are in my separate document which you can later refer through. A flowchart is a diagram-based design that shows the progress through the game. It also follows in an order from the start to the end, listing all the possible solutions and actions for each stage that the flowchart proceeds to. Game designers use a flowchart because it is often useful for representing an in-game mechanics and gameplay. If we do not create a flowchart, we will be unable to show how everything flows in a pattern. While the flowchart starts from the start button, not the button, start chart, and goes to the end, it does not stop until it finds the same symbol that has end on it. So it keeps flowing through, and it will do different functions, such as it could take, so this is my main menu, so it will ask, does it select the first thing, which is play? And if it's no, it will go down and ask second, does it press Ctrl, no, no, and no. If it says yes, then it will go through C, and C would lead through this one. So it keeps flowing until it reaches the end. There's an in-depth guide on the flowchart, and there are different diagrams given on the same document that I referred to earlier. So what are the advantages of having a flowchart? So basically, flowchart is easier to understand. Like anyone can look at this and know, like, oh, so this one would go here and this it would do that, compared to like just a report saying, oh, this would do this, this would do this, but the person could get confused. So it is easier to communicate when using a flowchart. But the disadvantage of flowchart can also be that while it is easy to understand, it is still complex to build. So if you have an error on your flowchart, you can easily mess up everything. So you have to be careful when creating a flowchart. So our next slide would be objects and interaction. So objects in a game are things that the player can interact with within the game. So they could be like player, enemies, blocks, tiles, coins, traps, anything that the player can interact with his character. So for example, if the enemy attacks the player dies. That is an interaction. So it will be like object 1 would be the player, and object 2 would be the enemy, and the collision would be the interaction itself, and the death would be the output of it. So that's how objects and interaction work. So if we did not have an object, then basically we would not be able to create a game, because without an object there wouldn't be a visual game that's really good. So we use objects. There are a lot of ways of using different objects. So right now I'm just making a 2D game, so my object should be in 2D sprite, but there could be endless possibilities of 3D sprites, 3D, and a lot of it. So that would be for objects and interaction. Our next slide would be input and output. So input processing and output chart is an important factor when creating a game, because it allows you to identify what's the input and output along with the process of it. So like I said earlier, if a character touches coin, that's the input, but the process should be score increase, because since the character touched this coin, the score is supposed to increase. So that would be the process of it, and the output would be the score will update and increase by 1. So if you go back to my canvas, it will go 1 higher. So if it's 13, it will become 14. That's how it increases. That's the input and output. So listing your inputs and outputs early on, before the game development, before creating the game on game design, it will be really helpful, because you can know what are the inputs and how to code it. So our next slide would be code structure. Alright, so like I said, in input and output, we also need to know code structure is when you write about what code will be used when creating the game and what codes to use when performing object interaction. If we do not have a code structure created before we start programming the game, then we won't have a logical structure to work with. So right here it says return button, and if we use if statement, so if return is selected, then go back to the previous page. So what this means is whenever a return button is clicked, it will load you to the previous page. So this is how simple it is and identifies what the code is supposed to do. So if I created this and there was someone else who wanted to develop the game, he could look back into this code and will know easily that what I wanted it to do. So that's what the code structure does. It helps identify what the codes are and how they are going to be used within the game when creating the actual game through the design. So next page would be data dictionary. Data dictionary is used to name what variables we have within the game and what are its data type. So it shows us what the data type of the variable is, and it can also be used to declare variables. So right here my variable would be player name, so it will also ask, is it required? Yes, player name is required, and what data type it is. It's a string, and what's the length of field. So the length of field would define how many characters you can put in it. So you can put anywhere from 0 to 10, 1 to 10. So you can write SAZAN, and that would classify as a name. But if you put anything above 11 like SAZAN, RAI, APP, so that would cause an error. So, and the comments are basically describing what the actual variable and the character would do, and this is the string for the, and this is the declaration for the player name. So string player name, which is the variable, equals Sazan, which is my name, which I would input. So the next page would be class diagram. Class diagram is an illustration of relationship between its classes. So a class would be asking what do I have, while the variable would be what am I, and the methods would be what am I supposed to do. So the top one is class, the second one is variable, and the last one is methods. So the first player, that's a class, so it will ask what do I have, and the variable would be what am I. So name is string, score is integer, time is date and time, and the method would be what am I supposed to do. So the name, set name string, and score, calculate score. So now we would not put any spaces on this while creating the diagram, so that's a key mistake people usually make. So for example, you can see enemy type, there is no space because that is done on purpose, because we cannot allow spaces when creating class diagram. So sustainability and maintenance. So sustainability and maintenance focus on how you can sustain your game and maintain it throughout the time. So like I said earlier, I was planning on making stage 1 and stage 2, but if I wanted to go further, I could make stage 3 and stage 4. To do this, instead of straight up scrambling the data I have for these games, stage 1 and stage 2, I can take some of the parts, separate completely in a different place, and develop a stage 3, and once I'm confident with it, I can put it back together with stage 1 and stage 2 along with the whole game, then put it in as an update saying run update 2.1, and if I find any bugs, which can be like identified, and like if the player identifies it, they can contact us through the user manual, and if they can't, if it is us who finds it in testing, we'll just fix it and update it again saying run version 2.2. So that is how we're going to sustain and maintain the game. I think that's the last one. Yes. So thank you for watching.